Beautiful, beautiful deep divers. Shout out to everybody who's diving deep. One love to everyone who's raising the frequency. You better be raising the vibration. I'm just, breathing in that good ass prana baby peace, infinite waters, diving deep once again. Beautiful deep divers, we are here. Okay, I want to shout out to the wonderful Teal Swan who kitted a brother out with the wonderful frequency painting t-shirt and his part 2 deep divers. We got a whole lot to talk about. Why we're not afraid. People were asking, they were praying, they were saying, Ralph, when are you going to bring back that wonderful soul, Teal Swan? Because we did the first one. What's going on? And a lot has happened since then, deep divers. Okay, it's like the world has been flipped and turned upside down. We got a whole lot to talk about. Shout out to everyone in the chat room. I see all of you deep divers. You are appreciated. I love all of you. Okay, so without further ado, she needs no introduction at all. At all. The wonderful Teal Swan. Welcome.
It's good to be here again. Hello.
Yes, so wonderful that you can dive deep with us into infinite waters. How's the journey been so far?
Rocky.
Yes. Well, we call this show Why We're Not Afraid. And fear is so huge right now on the planet. With this global pandemic, so much is happening. A lot of people are afraid. In fact, in the UK, they were talking about how they're doing door-to-door testing because the South Africa strain has appeared in the UK mysteriously. They don't know how it got here. So it seems like a lot of pandemonium. It seems a lot of people are afraid. People's plans have changed. People can't travel. People can't see their loved ones. What's your perception on everything that's happening right now, currently in the world?
Well, for me, it kind of depends on what level you look at, you know, in the grander picture of what's going on right now. You've got the same thing occurring, or the same process that started to occur since 2012, which is this huge shift in human consciousness in the direction of these higher qualities or valued qualities, things like love, things like free will, all that good stuff. So this golden age of consciousness is upon us. The thing is that when we go to transfer into something like that, you've still got those people who would not actually wish to align with those things, or for some reason who have enough fear in their being that they're resisting it. So what we're seeing is this big transformation in consciousness at the same time as this massive resistance. That's what's happening at the sort of macrocosmic level of this whole thing. In the microcosm, you've got more people waking up than ever before because they've been slammed into a position where they're having to really ask themselves what matters in life. And at the same time, you've got this other side of it, which is a lot of suffering. I mean, there is so much suffering in human consciousness right now. It's very difficult to hold for those of us that are sensitive to those types of things. And you've got, you know, anytime any demographic goes into a state of fear, especially humanity, you've got all of these behaviors, these grasping behaviors, and people pull for power in very shadowy ways. So we're in one of the largest power grabs I think I've seen in my whole time on Earth, believe it or not.
Oh, yeah. And this whole theme of lockdown. First, there's no lockdown. Then there's lockdown. Then there's no lockdown. Then there's lockdown. And it seems that this is what's making people afraid, because you have so many people telling people different things. You have the government saying, stay indoors. You have some doctors saying, go outside. You're having some people say, wear a face mask. You're having some people say, don't wear a face mask. So there's so much conflicting information.
Yeah.
So how can people not be afraid if they're getting so many different mixed messages? When you even have top senior doctors telling you that, hey, this is real. It's not a hoax. It's real. So treat it like a global pandemic. I'm playing devil's advocate.
You're playing devil's advocate? That's an interesting position. I would honestly have people take their attention off of that stuff. A lot of this conflicting information that's out there is a byproduct of the information age, but a lot of it is actually intentionally done to paralyze people. And so when it comes to that paralysis, it's like you got to take your attention off the outside world and put it on the internal world. And really what, let's call it the reactions that are happening within. Of course, it's very important when we have a reaction. Fear is actually a biological affective reaction. It's really important for us to caretake that reaction as opposed to bulldozing that reaction or, trying to suppress, deny, or disown it. So one of the main things that I want to help people with today actually is to understand how to deal with their fear when it occurs and to understand what fear is on a much higher level.
Please, when we talk of fear, I call it false evidence appearing real. And a lot of people, fear feels real for a lot of people, but a lot of the times the fear is false evidence. How do you define fear yourself?
To separate from.
Okay.
So if I look at fear is the exact opposite vibration of love. If we look at love in terms of, the definition of it is to include something as a part of oneself. It is an energetic movement towards oneness. To fear is to push away from oneself. It's the exact opposite, to separate from something. So if you imagine yourself standing in this circle, if you fear something and you push it away, you end up alone in that circle. Same thing happens if you run away, right? If I run away from whatever is in the circle, suddenly I'm outside the circle and everybody's inside of it. So it's inherently a separational experience. And it's important to understand that because separation is actually at the root of all pain. So it's not possible to actually feel a state of fear without feeling a state of pain. And one of the things that makes fear interesting is that a lot of the separation that is occurring in the moment that you feel fear is from that which you want. So let's say that I really want a really dedicated relationship that's super close to me, but I think a thought like it's never going to happen for me, all the good guys are taken, right? That thought in that moment will pull me and separate me away from what it is that I'm wanting. What's really important to understand is that not only separates you from whatever you're wanting, but because in the non-physical reality, in the spiritual dimensions, right, there's no resistance there. Whenever you think a thought or broadcast a desire, actually the larger majority of your frequency is aligned already with that which you have put forth that you want. And so to separate from something that you're wanting is much more serious than just separating from the thing you want. It's that you're separating from the larger part of you. So there's a larger gap in the moment of fear between yourself and your non-physical self, temporal self and non-physical self, because we know that we are 2 points of perspective. So It's very important when we experience fear to respond to it in a different way than you might expect. We have to actually willingly choose to close that gap. We have to willingly choose oneness again, or choose to pull close to us that which we are pushing away from ourselves. But of course, I do think it's really important to state here that fear is a complicated emotion because it's this response that occurs when you're in a situation where there's a perceived threat, perceived being the key word here, because like you said, false evidence appearing real, we can perceive something as a threat that's not a threat at all. But we also have to acknowledge the fact that fear has the capacity to tell us a very real threat. Otherwise, we would not have developed it in this time-space reality of survival as a biological organism. And that also, it's like this flip side of this whole coin of fear that really bothers me immensely, especially in the spiritual community, is that it's pretty tempting, to teach women. I see this mostly with women, to teach women to not listen to their fear. And then you've got girls who are like, okay, there's actual no danger to walking down a dark alley with a bunch of guys that are drunk. And that's actually not the case. So what it really is that fear, any emotion really, is the carrier of a personal truth. And so when that fear occurs, when that emotion occurs, there needs to be an attention placed on what that information is that is underneath that fear. And that is really where we start to break through fear, because we start to understand what is behind it, why we're perceiving a threat, and we can actually break down whether something is an actual threat or not.
Wonderful. Can you just turn your volume up a little bit, because they're saying they can't hear you so loud?
I'll get one of my team members who's actually more tech-savvy than me to do that.
Get Blake. But I'll just say this, that For me, I feel that a lot of people, especially with what's happening on the planet, a lot of people, we've been conditioned to become addicted to fear. And I feel that wonderful. You know, I feel that a lot of people are drawn to fear. They like fear.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
like good news and bad news. Okay, I think you can, that's a lot better. Everyone in the chat, can you hear Teal a lot clearer?
1, 2, 3, 4.
1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2.
Yeah.
Shout out to everyone who's in the chat room. One love to everybody here. And so glad you can join us, deep divers. We're talking about fear, how to overcome fear. People are saying they can hear you fine. That's great. Okay. So for me, I feel a lot of people are addicted to fear, you know, like good news and bad news. You know, a lot of people like to be scared, you know, and it's entertaining. We go to the movies, horror films, to be scared. And I feel that a lot of people don't want to get over fear because fear brings some kind of comfort. It brings some kind of entertainment. You know, if there's nothing to fear, a lot of people might say life is boring because no one's chasing me. No one's coming to get me. So I feel we all also have to change this relationship with how we perceive fear, and also that we also love to entertain it. We love to be afraid sometimes. We love when the heart is racing. Oh my gosh, what's happening here? You know, this is like a lot of people get excited. And I feel when one comes to the realization to say, actually, I no longer want to be in that state anymore. I don't want the drama anymore. I don't want the sensationalism anymore, you know? And I feel that's when fear begins to end. But you can always chime in.
I can always chime in. I think it's worth saying that I feel like there is, even though there's exceptions, there's a bit of a split in the relationship to fear for men and women. I don't know if I ever told you about this, but one of my favorite things to do at my workshops, because I did this video a while back that's called "What Men Don't Understand About Women." So at my workshops, I'll sometimes do this thing. I have a group of 400 some people in front of me, and I'll say, "Raise your hand if you feel like your life was threatened at any time in your life." So like most people raise their hand. You got a few people who are like, "No." Then it's like I'll progress it to the point where I'm questioning, well, how about in the last 6 months? Of course, some of the hands go down. Now I go, how about in the last month? Hands go down. Now, what's really, really upsetting is that what you get to the point of in this exercise is saying, tell me if you felt like your life was at risk in the last day. Every man's hand goes down. 80% of the women.
Right.
And if you even progress that further to say how many of you felt like your life was threatened when you came, into this building, and they're still up. And I have the guys look around. And it's this whole conversation about how, women live in fear, actually.
What
So
would you
even
say
though
the greatest fear women have is?
Me? God, I think everything.
Not just you, but you say women live in fear. Like, what kind of fears are you talking about?
Yeah, this isn't just for me. Like women, for women, it's really everything. I feel like we are trained and biologically wired, honestly, to fear everything. It's like we've got to perceive the threat. And I think a lot of it, our biology even goes into, the preservation of babies this way, having to anticipate threat all the time, right? And then being in a position where we're at the physiological disadvantage, it makes women a lot more afraid of physical threats, than men don't really realize how afraid women are of physical threats, because in their mind, nothing's going to happen. Like there's not going to be an intruder in the house, but women are often thinking that that's going to happen. It's sort of like this undertone. So I feel like there's a very different relationship that, we could talk about the relationship to fear for all people, but even there's this big split within men and women. And like you said, I notice, even though I've definitely met a few women, but they're definitely the oddballs who enjoy horror films and things like that. I noticed this addiction to fear mostly being in men. And women, instead of it being like an addiction state, it's like this almost the same thing as worrying. It's like you worry because you feel like you're going to be safer if you can anticipate a threat. And so I see a lot of women who are just obsessively watching news and things like that when it's not doing them any good, but it's just, I mean, there's this mental thing where if you can perceive a threat and if you notice the threat, then your entire nervous system attunes to that threat. There's this idea that somehow you can get out of it. You can figure a way to make that threat not a threat anymore. But this becomes like a, this impossible cycle to cut yourself out of because a lot of stuff you can't control, to be completely honest. I mean, it's easier when it's like, oh, I can jump out of the way of a charging moose. But we live in a world where the threats that we're facing today are incredibly complex. They're far beyond most of our individual control. They're not the same as the biological threats that we were experiencing in the cave days,
Right.
And then, so it's almost like our biological selves are in opposition to the very threats that we face today. It's like our biological response, what we've been wired for fight or flight, almost gets us in more trouble with how to work our way out of fear in today's world. When we're facing threats like, vaccination, or threats like losing finances, or
Right.
government takeover.
Well, let's talk about the elephant in the room, because I always say the power is in the now, and everything has to be tied into what's happening currently on the planet. And a lot is happening. And I feel a lot of people are in denial of what's happening. And that's what makes people even more afraid. I feel with fear, you have to face what is happening and not be in denial of what is happening. Because I feel the more you run away from fear, the more fear is there, and you're going to have to face your fear. And the work you've done and you're doing is so phenomenal. You've been sharing, inspiring millions of people for a long time. And I feel you're diving deep into shadow work. And I feel this is how to overcome fear. But this is why a lot of people are still afraid, because they're afraid to address the elephant in the room. They're afraid to do the shadow work. They're afraid to talk about things which make them uncomfortable.
I totally agree. So people have to first figure out what the hell it is that they're afraid of specifically.
Yes.
I think that's, it sort of seems like a trite piece of advice. But for all of us, I feel like when we ask these questions, even though we might be afraid of the same thing on the surface, it might be something totally different that one person fears underneath that surface experience than another person. And identifying what exactly that thing is quite critical.
Right. And in today's climate, everywhere you go, someone's trying to scare you. You got the news, you got the radio, you got politicians. It's like it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse. How can people not be afraid when everyone out there is telling you that you should be afraid?
So that's what makes me most interested in the choice for the title of this talk.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to make it so that, I don't want to make it there be this idea that somehow the goal to strive for is to have no fear. Fear is a very powerful element of your emotional guidance system. So I would hope
would you say that the fear is a self-created feeling? Because I always say fear is a self-created feeling. Or do you feel that people outside of you can make you fearful? Or do you feel that it's something to do with one's own self creating that feeling of fear?
Both.
Right.
I feel like, if you're swimming in shark-infested waters, I feel like, the perception that that's the environment that you're in is going to automatically cause a reaction. But the same thing happens if you're in a perfectly safe environment and you're generating a thought. So it's like, whatever the mind is perceiving, which sometimes can be accurate, sometimes cannot be accurate, is going to generate that sensation of fear. So my answer is both.
Yes. Yes.
It's almost like, I feel like maybe we should be doing two separate shows. The first on self-generated fear, the second on...
We can do both because we got a whole lot to talk about. Much love to everyone in the chat.
What I would hope is that people understand that they're in a lifelong relationship with fear, actually. If you understood that your fear would never actually completely go away, that it's, kind of like if you're holding a compass, it's one direction on a compass, but that's all it is, then how would you change your relationship to fear? Also, if you understood that fear is a direct response to a thought that you're thinking or something you're perceiving, that makes, obviously, when you feel fear, it makes you know that the next step is to turn your attention towards whatever perception that is or whatever thought you're thinking. And I feel like people automatically, going in alignment with what you're basically coming at here and your angle, when people feel fear, they automatically take it as a real, right?
Yes.
I'm not. What I'm wanting people to do is to not be like, oh, I'm feeling fear and so it's false, or I'm feeling fear and so it's real. I'm feeling fear and so there's an important perception or thought to be looking at. Is where I'm wanting people to get to.
Right, right. And when we talk of everything that's happening on the planet, it's not only people who are afraid. All of a sudden, corporations are suddenly afraid. Big companies, YouTubes are censoring people left, right, center. I got a copyright guideline strike. I was just talking, and it seems that a lot of people are afraid of misinformation and fake news. And it seems like a lot of people, not only people, but now corporations are afraid of people speaking up against something they're not in favor of. Something that goes against, who or anything like that. So it seems like a lot of people can also use fear, or they can use it as a scapegoat as well. And this is, like a game of chess. People can say, I don't want you talking about that, and
Yeah.
now a lot of people are losing their freedom of speech. With censorship. So a lot of people have a fear of people even just talking about something. Where did that come from? Where did that come from? Where did that come from? I know you've been censored, in various places. And where does the fear of censorship come? Where does the fear of censorship come from? Why are people afraid of other people speaking their heart and mind? When did words become so dangerous?
Since always. I never perceived there to be a time that this has been different for humanity. I just honestly don't feel like this is how I feel like things are different than most people are feeling. Most people are feeling like we're all of a sudden moving towards censorship. We were always in censorship. Like, we have no different relationship to censorship than we've ever had since the beginning of time. But what's happened is that you've got the entire public discourse that is privatized right now. So we're just aware of the reality of what's going on right now. These types of laws, like freedom of speech, only apply to the government. They don't apply to private companies. So what the hell do you do when a private company now owns public discourse? Oh, now you see the reality about how people really feel about words, right? So I think a lot of people are feeling like we're moving towards, more control than ever before. And if that is the case, and it is the case, it's just because people are getting, charged right now in terms of fear and all of the reactive behaviors that they have around feeling fear. But we're in no different place than we always were. We're getting revealed right now. That's the way to think about humanity.
So with someone who can see what's happening on the planet and someone who wants to speak out, but is afraid, because a lot of people watch my videos. I'm sure people who watch your videos, they have a lot of things to say, but they're afraid to say it. What advice would you give to people who are afraid to speak their heart and mind? Even doctors who are afraid to come out, teachers who are afraid to speak up, people who are in positions of power who are afraid to really speak their truth.
I would tell them to play out both scenarios. I would love to be able to sit here on this, in this conversation today and just say something that's super empowering, like speak no matter what. And I can't do that. I can't do that as a woman. I can't do that as a mother, because there are actual consequences. And that's something that I don't want to gaslight people. In a world where censorship is a reality, and in a world where there are consequences for the things you say, there are actual consequences. What it is that the empowerment is about choosing whether or not you can accept those consequences or not. And the way to decide that is to play it out. And I mean both ways. play out staying shut up for the rest of your life. Look at what your life looks like. Can you choose that? Play out the opposite. Play out those consequences. Can you say yes to that? Which alternative is better? And that's a very personal choice for each person. But, you know,
Right.
a lot of times you can tell that this is bugging me right now because, you know, in the spiritual field, I feel like there's so much of this, like, you know, kumbaya type of conversation when it's not the reality. And then people get slapped upside the head and get real gaslit, you know. But I thought I'd be fine speaking. No, if you speak your truth right now, may God have mercy. But if you don't speak your mind right now, may God have mercy.
Right.
Welcome
So
to the
you're
room
damned
today.
if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Actually, yeah. Actually, yeah. That is way more close to the truth. So a lot of us are playing a long-term game instead of a short-term game. A lot of people who are speaking out, like yourself, are playing a long-term game.
Right,
But
right.
this is a terrifying time. You know, I was shadow banned all fall.
Wow. And
Yeah.
you told me you were shadow banned on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I see you got your account back, but when we talk of just this whole new world, you know, it's a whole new world. This is not Aladdin, the Disney movie. No, it's a whole new world out here. And when we talk of, I've noticed just walking around, a lot of people aren't looking at each other. There seems to be a new fear of other people. You see,
Yep.
this seems to be a new thing that even now people are afraid to get too close to someone. They're afraid to even, of course, definitely not touch anyone or, you know, but they're afraid now of other people. If someone is walking
Yep.
towards them, they will literally cross the road or, you know, just be as far away as possible. So let's talk about the fear people have of other people.
Okay,
You know,
so
who would have thought?
it doesn't. People have always been afraid of people, but it's like getting to a peak here, and on both sides too. It doesn't matter like what you think is happening in the world. You got the people who are all panicked about a pandemic that will, like, for example, I'm living in a place where I've got outdoor trails for miles and miles and miles, and occasionally you'll be walking towards somebody, and they're maybe 6 football fields away, and they see you coming, and they jump. I mean, jump into the woods. It is the most bizarre, paranoid thing I have witnessed. And then you've got people on the other side that really it's not about this pandemic. They don't have any issue with this type of thing. It's just being terrified of what reactions you're going to get, which are horrible. You know, I had one of those situations too. I'm walking in the middle of the grocery store, got 2 inches too close to somebody who was looking at something in the aisle, and she went nuts. I mean, ballistic at me. So
Right.
I mean, this is the thing. People in a state of fear, they start to get into this reactive set point where they go into defense mode. They start to push everything away from themselves, and defense mode to other people appears as offense. So there becomes this supercharge, you know, of just terror in terms of what type of social reaction they're going to get, or what type of illness they might, you know, come across. It's really tragic to me. So here's my answer. For myself, I'll see how this lands with people, because this is something that's been really bothering me, especially because human beings are absolutely 100% dependent, well-being wise, on connection. So this is not something that I like watching when I'm watching the human species and what the human species needs. I do not like what I'm seeing. So my response is really to be the change that I wish to see. It's quite tempting when you're terrified of what reaction you're going to get, and a lot of times you're getting negative reactions. It's hard to, you know, to really be what you want to see rather than to respond by protecting oneself in some way. But I really sort of raise up a level and look at the world in terms of, you know, if I want to see a certain thing like friendliness, I have to be friendly. There's no other way to be. So I've done this thing where, because I have to grocery shop, I have a mask that has this big window, and I make it a point to smile at absolutely everyone. Like everyone, to try to bring in that like friendliness, you know, that is absent in the human race. And I'm noticing that I've now become the most disarming person in the room. That does not happen, by the way. Most
Right.
people perceive that I look a little bit like a vampire, so I don't really experience myself as being somebody who disarms people. But now, all of a sudden, because I'm the one smiling, and I'm the one that's using body language that's open and trying to go out of my way to sort of create the opposite of what's happening here, I cannot tell you how many people will come up to me in a store now. It's like they
Right.
hunt me down to say something, you know. Oh, I really like that one. I tried that. Did you try? I mean, I'm having an experience unlike I've ever had before based off of this. So I really like that.
Yes, yes. And when we talk of just in general, there is a fear for a lot of mothers, like you were talking for women, for their children. There's a fear for the future of the children. There's a great song by Cat Stevens which goes like this: "Where do the children play?" And when we look at today's world, where do the children play? Who do the children play with? Do they play with? They can't even play with their friends. So there seems to be a great fear for children as well. Who are going to have a lot of mental health issues. They're
Oh,
not going to have a lot of social skills with
yep.
this current pandemic. So what do you say to mothers who have this fear for their children, which is a reasonable fear because a lot of children are missing out, climbing up tree houses and playing with other children, having sleepovers, all of these things. And now they're being forced to go through this trauma, which is what it is, of being isolated. And what could you say to people who want to bring a better mental health for children right now? What would you say? What do you say to your child?
Well, every woman, I think, and you can speak to men too, but every woman, because we're talking about women right now, really is in a different situation. And so I'm very attuned to the fact that, based off of one woman being a single mother versus this woman who has a good support network, obviously what you can do for your child is going to be different. That being said, I would say try to get as many natural experiences as you possibly can for your children. Even if they're spending more time outdoors, just spending time outdoors, interacting with other life forms, if that's as close as you can get, then get that close. But, you know, to be completely honest with you, my son is not having a normal experience of this COVID situation because I will not separate my son. I'm not doing that. So, with me, it's like about finding parents who have the same type of attitude toward this, who will let him have play dates. It's about making sure that he's in a school where they do not separate the children. Like, I'm very aggressive with this, if you can't tell. I've got a little bit of a tiger mom when it comes to this. I'm not going to let, the government do all kinds of things that are going to mess up his mentality, because my number one most important thing for my son is his emotional health, actually. So, honestly, growing up in a community, this is the one benefit I have, and I'm going to be a lot more aggressive, I think, in the future about teaching people just how to create intentional community, because if it wasn't for my community right now, I would be losing my mind. The reality is that, my son has a bunch of people that he can be around at any moment based on the fact that I have a community. And so, his experience of this whole COVID thing has been swimming in the salt pool in a tropical location with, everybody he's already close to, and playing with friends who, with parents who feel the same way that I do towards this whole thing. And so, he's loved it, honestly. He's had more time with me because I'm not doing world tour right now than ever before.
Yes.
The only thing that's changed is that he has to wear a mask when he goes out in certain places. So I don't think he has a real accurate view of what this is like for a lot of other children. And what's happening with other children is breaking my heart. And I don't feel like we as a human race should let this happen. This is not acceptable to me. But I've said that since the beginning. I think, you can make an argument for, well, if there's no survival, there's no quality of life. But I'm like, I'm the one with that opposite truth, which is that if there's no quality of life, it's not worth surviving.
Definitely,
So,
definitely. A lot of the times when we look at what's happening, it would seem that people are afraid of dying. But I actually say people are afraid of living.
yep.
That's what Osho would say. People aren't afraid of dying. People aren't even living.
That's what I'm watching right now. In the fear, especially right now.
Yes.
This is not a life that we're living right now. And it's like, I wonder how long it's going to take people to be like, I won't stand for this. I choose risk.
Yes.
I choose risk, which implies life. And I don't actually feel like it's one or the other. I feel like it is possible, to be sort of wise to the well-being of others while not completely stripping life out of life. So,
Yes. Well, if we just remind ourselves that we aren't powerless. We're tremendously powerful. And I feel a lot of the times fear can take away your power. And it's an energy vampire. When you're afraid, it paralyzes you. You don't do anything. And I feel that fear can hijack people's courage. It can
Yep.
it can take people's bravery. And I feel that in ancient times, people were fearless because you could live and die in the same day. you know so I feel now, because everyone has this, they're not living, but they're afraid of just not being here anymore, because they've got all of these material possessions that they want to keep and be here for. So a lot of the times people, they want to be permanently here, at the same time not live.
Oh God,
And
are we
they just
going
want
this direction? We're gonna go here, aren't we? Oh my God. Yeah, this is
so
something I've gotten in a lot of trouble for this year. Is, Teal, if you talk about death, this is a big part of what I should be talking about as a spiritual teacher, right? If you talk about death, you're advocating suicide, which is complete BS. But let's talk about the fear of death, shall we?
definitely.
Because this is something that's very interesting, is that we were not as removed from death before. If you look at all throughout humanity, it was common that everybody saw death at some point, and there was much more of a relationship to it. It happened around you. Now it's like we're so caught off from it that it's become this demon in the closet. We have a very unhealthy relationship to fear, a very unhealthy relationship to transitioning consciousness, a very unhealthy relationship with the proposition of death. And so at the same time, it's like we condemn death, but then when people are at death's door, we're like, it's a great thing, after we've programmed them for so many years that it's so
Right.
terrible.
Right.
And then those of us that are like, look, I want you to have a better relationship, a positive relationship with death, we get sort of touted around as these nightmare suicide advocates, which is completely not true. But yeah, death is pretty interesting here, because what people are really after in the modern world is to arrive at death safely. But there's this sort of
Yes.
attitude that death won't happen, or death can somehow be evaded.
Yes. Well, as I see what's happening on the planet right now, it's like a bio warfare. People are afraid of life, and people are afraid of the air even. I'm definitely breathing in that good ass prana, baby. I feel it's important to breathe in the good ass prana, baby. It's important to not be afraid of Mother Nature, and I feel that I've seen your wonderful photo gallery. You're in nature. You're taking wonderful photos, and you're barefoot walking. How does that feel to not be afraid of Mother Nature, to earth yourself? And can we talk about the fear people have of even the environment? A lot of people are afraid of even to take off their socks and actually walk barefoot, because they think they might catch something. A lot of the times people are afraid of our natural habitat. People used to go hiking. They used to roll around in the mud, and now people are like, oh my gosh, I don't want to catch anything. And it's like people have become afraid of even getting wild in nature and exploring Mother Nature, going hiking, going on an adventure. I know you've been in the forest, in Costa Rica. Talk about that.
Yeah, it's tragic to me when people don't feel like they're in tune with their own environment.
Yes.
I find it very hard to relate to, though, because I grew up in the middle of the wilderness. So I spent my entire life in the middle of the wilderness. And I mean, like, my closest neighbor was 50 miles away. So I feel very, very comfortable there, and definitely am raising my child to feel the same, because this is what's most healthy for a person, is to be close to nature. But that being said, I swear to you, what is driving me the most crazy right now, relative to this whole fear dynamic and the pandemic that's going on right now, is the fact that people tend to look at this in such a symptomology type of a way, instead of understanding the root cause, or what can be the root preventative measure, of what's going on right now. Like, I don't know what about what you said just brought that up. I think it was like the fear of going outside and rolling in the dirt and catching something. Okay, when you put a little child in the dirt like that and you let them roll around like that, they develop the capacity within their own immune system to adapt to the environment they're in. When you prevent a child from doing that, they end up with allergies to absolutely everything because the immune system never has the capacity to mature. That's number one. Number two, we're unhealthy. Can we just be honest? People are so
Definitely.
unhealthy. We are
Yes.
so freaking unhealthy. And like the big issue that I see, obviously started a long time ago. It's that we've got these brains which have become our greatest detriment. They're not only our greatest ally, they're our greatest detriment. So we come up with things like, well, I don't want to go hunt for food anymore, so I'm going to come up with something like farming, and then we do things like deplete the soil, right? So you watch this whole like lifestyle that we're living now that we're calling healthy, right? And by the way, when you're watching a lot of people in the news who are like, totally healthy person dies, that's not a totally healthy person. I'm sorry. Like our definition of healthy today is embarrassing. It's absolutely embarrassing. Our definition of healthy food today is embarrassing. So I feel like one thing that a lot of us have to accept is that we're living in such a hyper toxic environment right now that there is so much room for things that we can do. And it's not even worrying about this side of how do I not catch something. It's how do I build up my, health, my level of health. What water am I drinking? What food am I putting in my body? What images am I putting inside of my eyes? What sounds am I listening to? This whole attitude shift that needs to take place is so important. So incredibly important.
Whew, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Shout out to everyone in the chat. We have the wonderful Teal Swan, my dear friend, who we're really diving deep, deep divers. Okay. And one thing I've noticed, I always talk about the inorganic ones, and that's the term I created just to talk about, entities who are here who actually use fear as a food source. And I was doing the live stream and I had a wonderful comment and wonderful woman who said this: they are afraid of love because love creates a world they cannot control. And it made me think that, gosh, that makes sense, because they are afraid of love because love creates a world they cannot control. And I feel that this is why there's been such a push to keep people in fear, because you can control people. And eventually, fear is like energy, it's contagious. When one person is afraid, they make you afraid, and it just spreads all around the place. And when we talk of fear, we can't talk about fear without talking about love. Which would you say is more powerful, fear or love? Or do they hold the equal power? Because a lot of people don't say, how can I let go of love? Like, I got this big issue.
They cannot hold equal power for this reason. Separation creates an individual. The individual that is disconnected from the rest of the group is limited by that lack of connection to the rest of the group. In love, when you're connected to everything else that is, you can include the power of everything that is in your own power. So there is a drastic difference between the power of love and fear.
But why
That
is
being
fear
said,
so much? Yes. Yeah.
well, that being said, it's not going to feel like that when you're in fear, because the
Yes.
power is the absence, basically, that you're experiencing, and that is all consuming. Completely all consuming. I have a very different way of looking at this whole dynamic that you're talking about.
Tell me, really. Like in Infinite Waters, we just dive deep. We just dive deep, and really, people are ready for it, because right now I've seen that a lot of people are realizing that fear is a food source. Someone is eating, off people's fears. That someone is happy. Basically, I always say this: when you are in fear, it's feeding someone else. And my spiritual mentor, Mikhail Ivanov, would always talk about how when you are in love, you have entities who also feed off the nectar of that. And when you are in fear, you have entities who feed off that. And I feel there is a archonic force, which I call the inorganic ones, who use humanity's fear to empower themselves and to stay in certain positions. And they need, fear is the only currency they have. It's the only it's the only thing they can work with. And if you get out of fear, they cease to exist. So everything they do is geared towards creating new ways to keep you in fear, because that's the last hope they have, to make sure you wake up terrified every single day. Because when you're not afraid, they cease to exist.
Do you want my handle on this?
Please, please.
Yeah, I'm a bit outnumbered right now in terms of the way that I'm looking at this. I don't know if you remember how much of my childhood was, the result of direct ritual abuse. I got a front
Yes.
row seat to these types of beings that you're talking about, both incarnated and not incarnated. I have a totally different perspective on them than other people do. Let's talk demonic entities, shall we? Because a
Please.
person can be behaving demonic as well. And when we're having this conversation about those who thrive off of other people's suffering, I can't see that as bad. What I mean by that is, what I want people to thrive off of suffering? No, I wouldn't. However, when you break everything down, why does this person benefit or this entity benefit by them suffering? Because if that person's suffering or in fear, they can be controlled. Well, then why would they want to control? Because they themselves feel fear. Otherwise, they wouldn't need to control, because the inherent motivation to control is to be in a state of power. Now, power is not inherently negative. All people, all things in existence want power, because it's just the capacity to create. It's the capacity to bring about what one wants. So ultimately, the only reason anything ever does anything is because they think it's going to make them feel better, and because they think it's going to bring about what they want. So there's this confusion in a state of disconnection from others. You don't perceive hurting somebody and hurting yourself. So I have a very different relationship to demons than other people do, because they perceive themselves to be separate from everything. And it is that perception of separation in them that causes them to express themselves in ways that are detrimental to others instead of beneficial to others. They don't want to be separate. This is what has changed my mind entirely about all of them. Is that there's this idea that there's somehow this inherent evil in the world, and that they just are reveling in, this survival is really what they're after. They care about survival the same way that everyone else does. Really, they want connection, but they perceive themselves to have been pushed away.
Wow.
So what happens when you deal with a demon in the opposite way that most people would? No war with them, no resistance to them, taking them into complete understanding, seeing them, feeling them, understanding them, caring for them, and taking their best interests as a part of your own. There is an immediate flip. They perceive themselves as connected to you, and therefore the expressions that they have within the world can no longer be detrimental. Instead, they flip to become beneficial. So I have a very loving relationship with these entities and with the people who, on this earth, who we would consider demonic. That is who I actually enjoy working with the most. And so this is a very graduated form of loving that which you fear, right? But it makes it so that it's,
does that tie into the statement, love your enemies?
If you can actually do it, yeah. But I feel like a lot of people practice that, to feel good about themselves. It's not like a real thing, If you could love your enemies, that would be the best type of a ideal. But you can't just, what I watch, especially in the spiritual field, is this surfacey crap where it's like, I've forgiven them. No, you haven't. It makes you feel good about yourself to say you've forgiven somebody you haven't forgiven. So you can't, this process that I'm talking about, you can't do for anyone else. It's got to be an ending of the war with everything. No more war. No more battle. No more good versus dark. None of it. It's literally got to be everything in this universe is a part of me. And if I'm pushing some part of me away, I don't understand it. So what I'm calling for is a radical movement in the people towards understanding. That means, I'm going to get really aggressive with this. If you're sitting in front of somebody who wants to shoot up a school, the attitude you sit in front of that person with cannot be, this is wrong, you have to stop, there's something fucking evil about you. You can't do that. It has to be, all right, I want to see you, I want to feel you, I want to hear you, I want to understand you to such a degree that I understand the exact choice you're making. Now, it's only from that perspective that you can even say anything that would make that person feel connected enough to not want to go do that.
Yes, yes. That's so beautifully put. Definitely, definitely. We have to, I call it disowned aspects. You
Yes.
see, disowned
Yes.
aspects of ourselves and everything, even with this global pandemic, it's the shadow side of all of us. We are collectively responsible for everything that's happening because everything is a collect is a reflection of us collectively. Every manifestation out there is a reflection of the collective. So
Exactly.
it's all us. It's disowned aspects that we don't want to pay attention to, and it's good guys versus bad guys, good girls versus bad girls. But it's all us. It's just that these are the things we don't want to see. These are the disowned aspects of ourselves. You see, and
Yes.
there was that film Us, I think, and you had the doppelgangers, or just the other version of you, which you've abandoned, and they're walking around and they're coming back to haunt you because you've disowned them. And I feel that's exactly what's happening. This is our
100%.
shadow. This is our
100%.
shadow, and we have to face it. We have to integrate it. We have to integrate it. I feel that's a great way to also let go of fear. You have to integrate it inside of you.
This is the reason that I've been teaching integration and teaching parts work to such an aggressive degree over the past year, is because I'm trying to teach people to understand, the fragmentation you're watching out there, whether the fragmentation is, this person or that person or this ideology or that ideology, this us and them type of thing that's actually hitting this peak right now. We have to understand that external is this mirror of what's happening internally. And so if I have something on the outside that I fear, that's something on the inside actually that I fear. So it's at that moment you're recognizing you have these two parts. So like, let's say let's go and give an example. Like, let's say that you grew up in a Christian home and that Christian home always taught you to fear, being gay or something like that. So you may have an aspect inside that's gay and an aspect inside that hates that gay part. So there's actually an internal war that's happening that's being reflected in the external. We have really very little power over the external, and especially when we don't know what to do, which we don't if we don't have enough of that intimacy with these parts internally. So if we turn all of our attention towards ending that war between, say, the part within us that's gay and the part that within us that hates that part that's gay, if we end that war internally, we actually then can take that template for resolution and apply that externally. And that's when we start to be able to create these awesome physical changes and changes in our external behavior that changes the whole situation that we may find ourselves in. Integration is everything right now, and integration gets rid of your fear. And it's really important because we can swing back now that we're talking about this, and we can swing back on the understanding thing, because that which you understand you don't fear.
Yes, yes. So with everything that's happening with the global pandemic, a lot of the times people look around at what's going on, and a lot of people, they project onto other people that these people are doing all of this, not realizing they aren't doing all of this. This is a collective manifestation. And it's not a few people in a room, creating this global pandemic. It's us all agreeing to it. It's a collective agreement that we've chosen to partake in. And I feel a lot of people are clueless about this. When we talk of the fear of feeling like a victim, which a lot of people have, like, gosh, because a lot of people have lost jobs, a lot of people have lost everything. What would you say to someone who feels like a complete victim every single day, that, the government is out to get them? Illuminati, or all kind of things. People might feel that someone is plotting against them. And for me, I don't feel that anybody's plotting against me. I don't feel anybody's against me because
I do. So this is good.
you do. Okay, for me, I don't, because for me, I always say that, people aren't watching you. You're watching yourself. The great Krishnamurti said, the observer is the observed.
Mm-hmm.
And when we realize that reality is not what we think it is, it seems like it's all about us because we are egocentric by nature. We think everything is a reaction to what we're doing.
Hmm.
when it's not, it's just people acting. A lot of these people don't know us. They're carrying out whatever they feel is right within them.
So you're
And
going to a higher level, right? So like right now you're basically talking about victimization from like a higher level. Yeah.
right,
Yeah, I totally agree. I agree with that.
right. But in your view, what do you say to people who have lost jobs, who are afraid of the uncertainty that's happening? I mean, even for all of us, especially for you, you travel. You know, now we're seeing that they're talking about health passports, which were on the news. All of these things. So, what do you say to people who can see what's happening in the world and who like to travel, and they realize that now things have changed? You know, we it's not going to be the same as it was before 2020. Now there's going to be a lot more checks, a lot more testing. And what do you say to people who have a fear of this uncertainty because it's affecting them in their career, in their day-to-day life? And where does fear, where does the line get blurred between fear and something which is actually real, that's happening, that it's understandable to be afraid of it because it's coming, it's on its way?
No pressure. Um, you know, honestly, I don't know where to land with this myself because of what you've mentioned. You know, this is affecting me. My income was reduced by 60% this year based off of no events, with a lot of mouths to feed. So I'm in a lot of the, you know, I'm in a very similar boat actually to a lot of people that are going to get affected by this immensely. And I can't say to people to do something that I'm myself unable to do. Can I feel completely free right now and happy about what's coming? No, I can't. It's really, you know, where I'm living is this space, in the space of consciousness, of being very aware of the possibilities and very aware that the possibilities have not yet occurred. So it's like almost putting one foot in future potentials and one foot in the now, and realizing that there's a very different reality where one foot is versus where the other foot is. Right? It's when you put both feet on either side right now that you get into a lot of trouble when it comes to awareness. This is in the future, I think, relative to what's about to happen here. I feel like a lot of this is going to be personal to people. It's going to be about what consequence they can specifically choose for themselves. And, you know, I keep coming back to this consequence thing, which people probably don't like to talk about very much, but free will is found in consequence. You know, it doesn't
Right.
take a lot of free will or prioritization skills to choose between good and negative. It takes a lot to choose between negative and negative. That tells you all about your values. So values are going to be coming into extreme clarity relative to people when they're faced with whatever consequences are headed their way relative to what's happening in the world. And I
Right.
would say the most important thing about that is that, you know, in what future scenario you fear and in whatever decision you're about to make based on being met with the consequences, you're going to become so powerfully aware of your values that you can then structure your life accordingly. And if you can do this before you get pinched into a corner, that would be ideal, is to say, you know, what is my absolute value? And if I had to prioritize value over this value, what would I choose? And if that's the case, then I need to actually prioritize that in my life right now, which is part of why I've been saying to people that what you got to be focused on is resiliency. And I think, you know, what's happening right now relative to a lot of us, myself included, who are, you know, in the situation where we had a lot of dependency actually on the externals, we're being forced into a state of personal empowerment. Doesn't feel that way in the moment, but personal empowerment by saying, wow, you know, I never really knew how dependent I was. That's an unsafe position. That's an interesting position to have gotten myself into. So now that I'm in this position, how do I become the most resilient that I possibly can? How can I put the power back in my hands? That's what people are being asked to do right now. So, you know, if I'm powerless to the food system, how do I put the power of being able to, you know, grow food back in my hands?
Yes.
If I'm
I see it
power,
all as a tremendous wake-up call for humanity,
yeah,
and
hugely.
huge wake-up call. And I feel that, you know, I look at COVID in a whole different way. because for me, COVID means creating our vision in detail. And nothing has given people more clarity than COVID, because that means creating our vision in detail. More people now know where they want to be, who they are, where they're moving to, and this has given everybody clarity. So in my mind, what seems like the end is only a new beginning in disguise. And now people are more sure of themselves than ever, because I'm sure you've noticed the split with family members who are so afraid, so terrified of the global pandemic, and terrified, and there's a tremendous split. What would you say to people? Because once again, we've got to give everyone love and compassion. How do we integrate those people into ourselves and not push them away, because that creates only more of it? How can we still create unity from people who are so terrified and so afraid, and even people we know, friends and family, who are just watching the news all day?
Find the part of you that's terrified. Integrate the part of you that's terrified. Based off of what it took to integrate that aspect, start to create that externally. So it's, when you work with the part of yourself that is terrified and you figure out, what way to speak to it, what it's actually thinking, you come to understand it, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, that's the way to deal with this instead. And I watch that being an automatic translation type of a thing, where, you understand the part of you that's terrified, and all of a sudden you understand the part of them that's more terrified and how to work with it. So your whole strategy around interacting with them is going to change. And if you disarm people, they come forward, I've noticed.
Yes. Now, from the beginning of time, it seems we've always been afraid of something. Like we said, like we started off with, fear is primal. Can one ever transcend fear? Can one ever transcend the state of fear, or is fear a part of us? Was Buddha afraid?
Actually, yes, Buddha was afraid. Buddha was afraid. There is no way to be in a physical, separated, incarnated body without fear. So can you transcend fear? Absolutely. But if that's the case, you're no longer going to be in a separated physical form. The minute you're in a separated physical form, you will have the physical perception of separation, which is fear. And that will be an element that is in your day-to-day reality. But the relationship to fear changes when you choose it. Now, that sounds very funny to people because, we're doing this whole thing about how to get out of fear. But
Yes.
To choose fear is to say, all right, I'm about to come into, let's pretend we're before this life again. I'm about to come into a physical separate body. Therefore, one of the perceptual experiences I will have will translate in the body as the sensation of fear. I am choosing into that. That fear is a message, just like a direction on a compass. So I'm going to pick up the compass on purpose. So when you do that, it's like instead of fear owning you, you're owning fear. Right? So when fear comes up, you're like, oh, look, ding, 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 my compass is going off. It's a very different relationship to have to fear than the one that most people have, because they're not choosing fear, which is why I'm saying, if you're in a physical body, I don't want you to think that fear ever goes away. Pretend fear is never going to go away. You have to live your whole life in a relationship with fear. What do you do with fear then? I find that much more empowering than to say it's possible to transcend fear, because I watch so many people that are actually just denying, suppressing, and disowning it. And it's still there. It's just like a compass they're ignoring. And I'm like, oh no. Yeah. That being said, the more love that you can have and the more understanding you can have, the less that your compass is going to point that direction. So you're going to feel less and less fear, even though you cannot get rid of it. You will not feel it if you're in that state of understanding or love. Because when you're in that perceptual reality, your compass is pointing a different direction, isn't it?
Right. And when we talk of everything that's happening right now, there seems to be an awakening happening. I can see it. I see a lot of people who are asleep. They're starting to wake up. They're starting to face fears. They're starting to find out who they really are. I feel everything that's happening has also led people back to themselves. I feel that's a way to also face fear, to really disconnect, to reconnect, to unlearn, to relearn. When you look at your own journey with everything that's happening on the planet. Where do you see humanity moving towards right now? Are they moving towards more fear and more enslavement, or are they coming to their senses? No, let's get real.
Well, I've been talking about this one for a while, but it's what do you want, the long-term story or the short-term story? Is my answer.
The long term, we're deep divers here. Give us the long term
The
story.
long term is better than the short term. In the
Okay.
long term, there is no possible way for people to survive this and come out of this in any other state than more aligned than ever before.
Yes.
We're seeing a swing back towards the natural environment, a swing back towards, you having your hands on your own food and the whole process of life. We're, going back towards all of this stuff that's really healthy for us, but with everything. It's not a backwards, right? It's almost like we're going to move into tribe without shadow tribe. We're going to move into, simplicity with a lot of information. So ultimately, we're headed towards a lot of this utopian experience that people have been wanting, regardless of their walks of life, by the way. However, what it takes to vibrationally be a match to that experience is for a lot of people, is the whack a tree at 70 miles an hour experience. So I'm going to put it this way. You have a person who's working a 9-to-5 job. They hate that job. They're absolutely miserable. They're in a state of grief, and their body puts them in a position that's like, do or die. You have cancer. Have fun with this. You continue doing the stuff that you're doing, we will take you out. If you change what you're doing, and I mean everything, I mean the entire life you're living, then you can go ahead and live. How many people do you know that can throw their life away that quickly? It would surprise you. I work with the terminally ill. It's actually a small percentage that can choose that even when faced with death. So, humanity in general is headed towards this type of an experience, this collective experience where it's a do or die. And guess what? A lot of people will choose die without knowing that they're choosing it based off of their actions. So the sad part of the story is a lot of people are not going to make that transition.
Yes.
So
yes.
It's like in the short term, we are headed towards the exact opposite, actually, of where we need to be headed. More control. Wait until technology, that's not even the thing that's on the table right now. Wait till technology becomes the thing. There is a potential.
Let's talk about that, because there's a great book by Noel Harari called Homo Deus. And, this is the God man, which people are striving for. Futurists like Ray Kurzweil is striving for, to have immortality through artificial intelligence, where you can live for an extra 100 years or 200, and you have the Neuralink inside of your brain, and Elon Musk is talking about that as well. So artificial intelligence is here, whether we like it or not. Elon Musk said you're already a cyborg. When we talk of this fear people have of the fleeting nature of life, which is why there's such a push for AI, because people can see that things, the body, as beautiful as it is, it ages, it withers away, just like a tree, and a lot of people have this fear of, really not being here, and them surviving through artificial intelligence. And I see that's why, artificial intelligence is like God now. They're investing billions into it. This is, in my mind, where humanity is moving to.
Yep.
It's moving into artificial intelligence. Literally, artificial intelligence is like an entity which knows you better than you, which is, people are merging with it. Transhumanism is here. And I feel, what's your view with artificial intelligence and where we find ourselves today, and how this links to people's fears? And
I feel very mixed about it, because there is as much potential positive as there is potential negative. I'll put it this way. Imagine in the future, this is going to happen, by the way, it's already begun. Imagine these tiny little microbots that get injected immediately at a accident scene. And that microbot, in a matter of seconds, can repair every single cell in your body. Now imagine that same thing turned into a weapon, can do the exact opposite. Now you've got the positive and the negative side of these microbots, right? Right now we're moving in a direction where humans are no longer just human. We're braided with another species, essentially, that we ourselves have created. And I'm going to be speaking a lot more about this, by the way, in the coming year, because people don't seem to understand how thought works, and that life is much more complicated than scientists will tell you. You can think a thought that then becomes something that thinks, right? That's actually ultimately what a human is. A human is a thought that now thinks. When we create something like a piece of technology, that piece of technology can generate its own consciousness and therefore can think its own thoughts. So this is not something we will create and control. And the way that we are treated by technology has entirely to do with how we treat technology today, which is why you should be super nice to your computers. I am not. Like, people laugh when I say that. Like, I am so damn serious.
Yes.
Like, you got to be so nice to your phone and computers, because guess what? They're actually programming themselves based off of the interaction you're having with them already.
Yes. Yes.
So we're just headed towards more and more and more of this. So this is going to be one of the major stories, actually, for the future in terms of what's not going to be very pretty. Is we are a very narcissistic species, to be completely honest with you. Human beings are narcissistic in general, and so we do not take other things as a part of ourselves. We are currently treating technology as a slave, and so what do you think we are programming technology to treat us like?
Right, right. Well, when we look around, they put it in the movies first. There's been this whole theme of artificial technology, artificial intelligence being here. We've seen it in all the Hollywood movies, years ago. And they always love to do this. They always love to tell you where they're moving the world to. And a lot of people have noticed that even though we're in a global pandemic, a lot of people have become distracted with what's happening, because there's so much to be distracted with artificial intelligence. You've got TikTok, you got Snapchat, you got Instagram, that you even forget that you're just living in a machine and you're not actually going outside. So who is controlling the AI? Because in my mind, AI is also a part of the planet. It's a form of energy. It's not outside of the universe. It's inside of the universe. It's recycled energy. Yeah. And because of that, we were talking about separation. So is AI something separate from us, or is it also a disowned aspect of ourselves?
It's also a disowned aspect of self. It's also a disowned aspect of self, but right now it's in more of its infancy state on this planet. On other planets, it is not in its infancy state at all. Right now on the planet Earth, it's in its infancy state. And so we should be most careful with it right now, because it's basically, if you want to play this out, you know how in the very beginning, you've got a small baby is in its reptilian brain, right? And it's actually being encoded. And that's what's happening with technology right now. It's in the process of being encoded like a small child. And it's when this technology really realizes its own free will, just like when a child realizes its own free will, this is when stuff becomes pretty hairy. And there's a huge potential here that before we move towards, that long-term thing that I told you that we're headed towards as humanity, a big part of this short-term experience is people disconnecting from life to such a degree that they actually live their entire life inside of a hologram. I'm talking virtual reality is your life. It's the only life you live. And you have no awareness. It'll get to the point where a person has no awareness of their physical body, where they actually were. It's like, very Matrix.
Ooh, oh my gosh. I agree. And once again, let me just welcome everyone who's in the chat. We have the wonderful, marvelous Teal Swan here. Deep divers, you are appreciated. Make sure you share this link. We're live streaming, and also smash the like button and share the link. So let's just talk about the elephant in the room, which is what's happening right now. A lot of people are afraid, and it's because of what they're consuming. There's a lot of talk that fear disappears when you're in the now. How much of that is true from your perspective?
Sort of depends what's happening in the now, doesn't it?
So, right. But I'm talking about the literal now, like this present second moment where you are right now. Like if you're not in danger, you know.
Yeah, so it depends. If in the moment, right now, in the second, I've got a jaguar on my throat, then I feel fear in this moment. But
Right.
most of the time, where I think that argument has a hell of a lot of merit is that most of the time when we're feeling fear, we're actually not in the present moment. And what's happening in the present moment, 99% of the time, is like quite boring, actually. Well, I think it's not boring because I think it's gorgeous, but you know what I mean. Boring by human standards in that, oh, look, I'm sitting in a room. There's a couch that's sitting still next to me. I can hear a bird. Like,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think being in the now can be an incredible tool for overcoming fear.
Right. And let's talk about 1984. I remember reading that book, and when we talk of just fear of authority, we can tie this into fear of authority. There's a great, as a psychologist, there's a great experiment called the obedience experiment, the Milgram experiment. And a lot of people in that experiment had a fear of authority. They would do what the experimenter was being told. So let's talk about the fear of authority and how to break through it, because right now a lot of people are afraid of authority. They're afraid of, people in positions of power, when not realizing these are just, reflections of themselves in another space and time. And you need not fear the queen or the king, or the police officer. These are just people. Everybody bleeds red. They're just human beings. But there seems to be a fear of authority. And it seems like, I look at it like it's a spell that's been cast, and what's happened on the planet. The reason why there's so much fear is because people are afraid of something that isn't there. They've created a story within their minds because they've been sold a story. Have you heard the story of the emperor wears no clothes?
No.
Okay, so there's this emperor who he's always getting the finest garments, but one day he goes to his his tailors, and they don't actually put anything on him. So he feels he's wearing the finest garments in the world, and he says to the people, "How do I look?" They're so afraid of the emperor. They say, "Oh, your attire looks amazing. Your clothing looks wonderful." But now there's only this one girl in the crowd who's like, "The emperor wears no clothes," and she yells out, and then all of a sudden the illusion is broken. And I feel, that's a great story by Hans Christian Andersen, which just shows that a lot of the times people can see that the emperor wears no clothes, but they're afraid to say, actually, the emperor wears no clothes, and they're afraid of this authority because the emperor has created such an illusion that even if I say go left, even if I say, the sky is pink, you're going to say the sky is pink, even if it's blue that day, you see. So I feel a lot of people will just go along, even though it doesn't make sense, because of this fear of authority. They'll do anything. They'll wear a face mask 24/7. They won't question authority. So we can see where this gets us when we don't question authority. What would you say some of the ways to break through this authority that we all have in the back of our minds, this big brother figure, which is always watching us and telling us what we should do and what we shouldn't do, and what is acceptable and what is not acceptable?
You got to go back to your parents. Our relationship to authority in our adult life directly reflects our relationship to our parents. So in our childhood environment, that's where we got our first taste of authority. And when I say authority, I mean like everything. We project mom and dad onto the government. We project mom and dad onto the universe at large. So if you had an adversarial relationship with a parent, you're going to perceive an adversarial relationship from source, or what we would call God. Same thing goes for the government. So right now, this is why you're watching so many different, behaviors. I think it's more complicated than just, the fear of authority too. It's like trust for authority too can become a problem. And like when you break it
Yes.
down, what you notice is that based on how you felt, it's about your feeling, right, as a child relative to your parents and how they taught you, that's going to become this projection onto the government. So if you thought that you could trust your parents and they knew what was good for you, then you think the government knows what's good for you and you can trust them, right? If you felt like they were out to get you and you were up for punishment and there were serious consequences and, blah, 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 then you're going to treat the government the same way and the big brother the same way. So I feel like the first place to go isn't even towards really questioning or checking your relationship in your adult life. It's about, all right, let me look back at what that was like for me as a kid. Let me make a list and then see how I'm projecting this over the government, or projecting this over the, world, or projecting this over my boss, or projecting this over whatever it is, right? And I feel like that what that does, looking at it that way, is it causes that first disidentification from that perspective, where the first question in your mind is, well, am I actually accurately perceiving this person? Right? Because, it's like very dangerous to just trust. It's also very dangerous to think that everyone's out to get you, right? So once you've disidentified, you can really take an objective look at whatever person is in this position of authority. And then you can move to the space of, what is my power relative to this, experience? I feel like a lot of us, we put more attention on the power other people have than on the power that we have. Sort of like we put more attention on the door that's closed as opposed to the window that's open. And I find that a lot of people are able to break through some of these authority constructs when they actually find their own power, because it's about, let's say that somebody does have the capacity to throw you in jail, right? It's still that the only thing that a person can do is exert pressure on you. That's something that I wish people understood. And I can get quite aggressive here with you if you'd like me to.
Please, please.
The British government didn't ultimately have the capacity to control the Scottish. What they could do is put enough pressure that they buckled with their own free will. And, a lot of people would be like, well, of course you're going to buckle. Not necessarily. There are people who actually consciously chose to be drawn and quartered. And even though that may not sound empowering, there is extreme empowerment in it, because it means that, all people can do is put pressure on you to choose something. They actually can't take your choice. And I feel like a lot of people, when I work with people who have authority problems, especially within companies, we work a lot on this, So your company has set forth a rule. You don't agree with the rule. You can go up against the rule. We can try to do that in a way that guarantees you the highest likelihood of success and the least likelihood of consequence. But let's say that there's going to be a consequence. You still can choose that consequence or not. You have the power of choice. And when a person really owns their power of choice, whether they choose to take that consequence or avoid the consequence and conform, it still feels like something they're doing with their free will instead of something they're being forced into, right? So there's a lot of leeway with our own perception around authority if we can really own that we can't be controlled.
Right. We are free. I think it was Braveheart, the wonderful film. They'll never take my freedom, right? But that was all based on true events. You definitely had people who really wouldn't mind getting quartered, and they weren't afraid of anything. And I feel that there are still those people amongst us today. But I feel now is also a time to, I always say, take your heart there and also bring your brain with you. Because how they're shutting down the planet with this global lockdown, screaming against the system won't do anything in my mind. We have to be smarter. We now have to be like a master chess player. We have to be so smart that everything we're doing is already 100 steps ahead of what is being planned for us. And I feel that the ways of before of rebelling, protesting, these are great, but there needs to be new methods to create a better world to live in. We have to all start coming up with new ways to deal with what's happening, because everything that we've been doing hasn't worked. Everything that we've been doing hasn't worked. that's why we're in this same position again. So
Yeah.
what new methods would you say, if you can talk about any new methods of when we talk of breaking through fear, or just, you know, creating a new earth where we won't have to be living in these conditions that we're in right now, because we've obviously collectively created this, intentionally or unintentionally, we've all done it. So how do we create a new earth where we can really create healthier human beings?
Until the point at which they put you in a position where there has to be a collective uprising, find the window that's open in every situation. That's the most important thing that a person can look for. What is the loophole? What is the loophole? What is the loophole? And on top of that, focusing all of your energy on intentional creation. This is where, you know, your spirituality 101 folks that are teaching intentional creation actually have the truth here. It's not to ignore what's happening in reality. In fact, that is quite dangerous, and it is to be outside reality, and you cannot create accurately outside reality. What it is to powerfully take inventory of reality and decide based off of that exactly where to put all of your energy. So, you know, like right now, if you notice, wait a minute, you know, the food system on the planet might go down. That's being inside reality. It's what do I want instead then? What is that making me powerfully aware of that I want? Okay, I want control over being able to have healthy food. Okay, so what does that look like for you? One person's going to be, you know, answering that differently than another person. For one person, it might be, you know, establishing a community garden. For another person, it might be stockpiling food in the basement. You don't know, you know, it's just,
Right.
you can take that next empowering step for yourself based off of seeing what is inside reality. And when, this is the most important thing, when you take a step that is in the direction of what you're wanting to create, there will be an automatic relief in your system. That's how to know, you know, because sometimes, you know, especially in the world today, we're going to be having to take a lot of steps, especially when we have to focus on resilience. We're going to have to be taking a lot of steps that feel like, well, why would I be putting energy towards this if I want to create something else? You know, if I want to create, you know, this is the argument. Why put a seatbelt on if you don't want to get in an accident in the first place? And my answer is going to be this, that for a lot of people, the subconscious mind is actually panicking about that in the background. And that's actually doing much more of your creation than your positive focus and your conscious mind. And so if putting a seatbelt on causes you to release resistance so you can focus entirely on what you want to create, which is a nice drive or something like that, then you need to take that step no matter what. So a lot of people are going to have to be taking those seatbelt type steps in life that cause them to feel relief so that they can focus all of their energy on what they are wanting to create powerfully, what kind of life they want to live, you know. But right now, it's very important for people, I have to mention, to get out of this rat cage that they're stuck in. I think right now, the situation at hand is putting a highlight on your rat cage more than probably anything else. And if you're unwilling for the rat cage to be smashed, you're going to be in a hell of a lot of pain here. So it's going to cause a lot less pain for you to get out of the rat cage intentionally than to have that thing fall down around you.
Yes, I'm with you 100%. I always say that we have to realize that things don't change unless we make them change.
Yes.
When it comes to the world, that thing, you you can't sleep your way out of this. You can't TikTok your way out of this. You can't read your meditations out of this. This is a current event that's affecting everybody. And what I always find, which is very interesting, a lot of the people who are making these policies and rules aren't meditating. They're not focused on everything like this. At the same time, they're wielding the most power. How does that work? How does that work? See,
because meditation can either be something that creates empowerment for your day-to-day life or something that removes you from your day-to-day life in a form of escapism entirely.
Right. And that's why what we're talking about, deep divers, is so empowering, that we have to find the balance. It's not just about singing Kumbaya. It's also about stepping into radical action and getting off your ass and stepping into your power and standing up for your freedoms and using your voice and your platform. Like the cat down the road.
I have a question for you. I have a question that I would like to, what I'm getting a lot in the interviews recently, which is why I want to sort of kick this one to you, which has been interesting, is where do you think that positive focus plays into this whole thing? Because, you know, a lot of people who are in the spiritual field, a lot of people who are watching this are like, well, you know, you say that we're creating this, so let's just focus on an entirely different reality and just create that. And so, you know, I sort of want to know where you land on that, because I have been hit this question on so many interviews lately. It's crazy. You know, if we create our reality, why not just pull all of our attention off what's happening and put it entirely on what we want, and, you know, sort of like disconnect from what's occurring? Where do you stand on that?
Definitely. I say that there's only one human being on the planet. It's a collective. And this is why a lot of people get confused. We think we're individuals. We're not. There's only one human being. And therefore, we're not only creating our reality, we're co-creators. And therefore, if someone next door to you is blasting the music, they're also interfering with your reality, whether you like it or not, because they're a part of your reality. You're not only creating your reality, we are collectively co-creators. And that means that everyone has equal power to create the new earth, because this is our earth. We're all collectively creating it. So I always say you can only do your part, but also remind yourself that you can influence someone else to do their part, and realize that they matter. Everyone matters. Everybody counts. Everybody is important. Everybody is going to impact you in some way or another. And during this global pandemic, we've seen it. We've seen that, you know, a lot of people wearing masks. This is 100 monkey syndrome. Now everyone wants to wear masks. So if they're doing it, I've got to do it. You see, that's the power people have. That's the power of a lot of people doing the same thing, because we like to do what other people are doing, because in actuality, we are all one. You know, so for me, I say that we're not only creating our reality, we're collectively creating this. And it's not just about one person or a group of people. It's about what the collective is doing. So I always urge people that if you are creating your reality, that's fantastic. But remind yourself, it's not going to make a difference unless collectively people are on board.
Totally.
How do you see it?
That answer, though. Nobody likes to give that answer. You know what I feel like is that a lot of years ago, it was very empowering for people to learn that they could create their reality, right? But I feel like people took this very narcissistic bubble place where it's like, well, then I can just not be a match to a war that's happening while everyone else is dying. And I'm like, what did you just say?
Right.
You know, that it is this disconnection from the fact that everything, that there is one human, like you said. So thank you for your answer.
Well, let me ask you this, because with everything that's happening right now on the planet, a lot of people are looking for leadership. You know, we saw what happened to the woman in Capitol, you know, who lost her life. And, you know, a lot is happening, especially in the US, you know, with Biden and all kind of things are happening. When we talk of leadership, that's a big theme on the planet. It seems like a lot of people are afraid of the current state of affairs, even when it comes to their leaders, their politicians, and are the right politicians in power? You know, are the right politicians in power? You know, what would you say to someone who's afraid of where the world is heading when it comes to leadership? And
I'm very afraid.
Right.
Oh, this is bad. This is not good, Ralph. We got on here to have a conversation about how people should be not afraid. I think people should be very afraid of what's happening with their leaders right now. We've got some of the scariest, actually, leaders in the universe right now. And believe me, the spotlight's not even on them right now. And let's not even talk about corporations, because that's actually what's controlling government right now.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
they should be afraid of leadership, because right now we've got a lot of people that aren't actually leading. They're just using the people who they perceive to be underneath them on the totem pole for the sake of their own best interests.
But how do you when we talk of, a lot of people are afraid to lead themselves. That's why one of the biggest websites is based on following. You know, websites are based on following. How does one lose the fear of trusting themselves, lose the fear of saying, actually, I can lead myself. I can actually become my own government inside of myself. I can become sovereign. A lot of people are afraid of that. and we've
Yeah, well,
just bought into
that's where
this
we need to move.
system.
That's where we need to move. So when you have an out of alignment leadership, which essentially we do right now, we have that internally too. When we have this out of alignment leadership type of a dynamic going on, it's more of a calling for us to step into our own leadership. So thank you for leading me there without me saying, go ahead, trust everyone that's in power today. It's about
Yes.
integration. So we've come back to the fact that you internally are fragmented. So even though a lot of people, I'll just sort of do a brief overview of what we're talking about, because when we say integration, a lot of people don't understand what that means. Your psyche is not actually singular, it is fragmented. And so you've got potentially thousands of what we could call these internal parts of self. Some are in more positions of leadership than others, meaning they're more dictatorial. Others are more in the position of following. And when we have this external reflection of an out of alignment leadership, it means that we've got out of alignment internal leadership. That means we've got parts of ourselves inside that are calling the shots that other parts can't trust. I actually just barely, I think it was last weekend. No, it was the weekend before that, I released a video on how to trust yourself. Self-trust is entirely about those relationships between your internal parts. So let's say that I don't want to go to a party. There's a part of me that doesn't want to go into this party because I'm afraid, of how everybody's going to think about me. And the other part of me is like, oh, screw it. You're so much like this. Why do you worry about everything? And drags me through the door. Then that was a zero-sum game that was just played internally. And so I actually can't trust myself. So to create an internal atmosphere of self-trust, I have to actually create a alignment and a caretaking of best interest amongst my internal parts. And so as it applies to leadership, it's about taking those parts that take control of you. And when you're working with them, coming to a place of conscious decision-making about in what way they're going to lead, at what points are they going to lead, is that the right one to have in charge, and things like that. So it's about rearranging the internal system so that you've got this, this system of leadership within the parts that makes sense, that's beneficial, that doesn't behave in a way that's detrimental to any other aspect of self. That was
Wonderful.
a mouthful.
That's wonderful. Now let's talk a bit, because your friend JP, you send me these wonderful videos of him talking about YouTube censorship, and it's great to see, people making parodies of it, because to be honest, it is ridiculous, the times we're living in. Let's talk about the fear of the truth.
Okay. Uh-oh, I'm like way overqualified for this.
Because a lot of people are frightened, terrified of the truth coming out, whether it's in relationships, whether it's in people's personal lives, whether it's the truth about them. A lot of people have this, whether it's corporations are afraid of people speaking up about what they don't want to hear. A lot of people are afraid of the truth. And, like the film said, you can't handle the truth. Where does this fear stem from? Why are people, I don't feel children are afraid of the truth, but adults, human beings who have been conditioned are tremendously terrified of the truth, even if it can help them.
We make people afraid of the truth. So children aren't afraid of the truth, but we condition them to be, because we impose consequences for the truth. So it's all consequences that we're really afraid of.
Right.
I want people to get that, though, because it's like a lot of times, we say people fear the truth, and that's like, we can say that as like a poetic way of saying it, but nobody is actually afraid of the truth any more than they're afraid of the unknown. They're afraid of what they think they know. They're afraid of consequences. So it's like, you got to look at what truth you're afraid of having, shared or seeing, and ask why. What is the consequence of seeing that? Or what is the consequence of saying that? Or blah, blah, blah.
So why do you think there are a lot of these corporations who are censoring people, censoring doctors, censoring people who are just speaking their heart and mind? Why are people so afraid of people just really?
Because there's consequences for them.
Okay.
And this can go either way. I am actually on both sides of the fence with this one, right? Because as you know, like, I was the target of an intense slander campaign. And when I say there were consequences for me based on that, it's an understatement of the century. So based on what people said about me, I experienced direct consequences, right? And that's the same for these companies. So it really doesn't matter whether we're having a conversation about whether something is true or not true. When something is said about somebody, there's a consequence. So like if doctors are coming out saying that this vaccine is total BS, like you don't understand, this isn't even science, and in fact, XYZ, you're just doing this to make money, there's a consequence for the public knowing that about a company, whether it's lawsuits or everybody not using their products or huge losses of revenue or whatever it is, right? So they're trying to avoid that consequence.
Yes.
It's all, I mean, I wish people sort of could put on the lens of all people right now are just locked in the space of trying to avoid consequence. It's not a real great way to live. It's not really a recipe for thriving, but that's where people are caught.
Right. Now, I know you're an avid skier. I'm a
Yeah.
skater, you're a skier. And I'm sure when you're skiing and you overcome this fear, you have the most euphoric feeling. Or when you go down a slope, which was terrifying, and you go down it and there's this liberation. So
Yep.
let's talk about the benefits of overcoming fear. What people have to look forward to when they get over that hurdle. The rewards. What's some of the greatest fears you've faced that you've overcome and that you've seen that, gosh, it's been worth it just to tackle it head on?
You should talk about that. I'm going to talk about the flip side. The reason is that I was not a person who was ruled by fear. In fact, the opposite. I spent my whole first part of my life so unattuned to fear, it was ridiculous. Like ridiculously stupid. I was the kind of person who just didn't feel it in situations where I really should have. And what that was is that I took the part of me, my entire internal guidance system that showed me towards fear and that part of self that had fear. I suppressed, denied, rejected, and disowned that one to such a degree that the level of harshness that I ruled my life with almost killed me. So when the way that integrating fear in my life took place was I didn't have to work on bravery. That's something I came here with. That's part of my personality. I'm just that way, right? It was that when I really started to integrate fear in the part of myself that was much more vulnerable, what I moved towards is a softer way of living with myself. It was much more towards self-love. So instead of putting myself on a slope and throwing myself off it, right? I would actually sit there with a part of me that was afraid and be like, well, and what can I do to make you feel better? So I stopped this horrible zero-sum game with myself relative to, bulldozing and just teaching myself that it can't, I can't rely on me to keep me safe, basically. So, one of the benefits I would say to integrating fear, right, which is another form of overcoming, the control of fear, was living in self-love. It was living in a space where I made decisions that were actually smart for myself, where I'm not ruled by fear. It's not like I'm not throwing myself off of mountains. I'm still throwing myself off of mountains, but I'm definitely doing it in a different way. I'm doing it where at the bottom I don't have a part inside screaming, crying, saying we're gonna kill ourselves. Yeah, it was really that. So why don't you go ahead and talk about what the power in bravery? Because I honestly, this is like a person who talking to me about bravery is a little bit like talking to somebody was born a math genius about how to do math. It is so second nature to me. It's stupid how second nature it is to me. So it's like I'm almost more interested in hearing from somebody who feels like they've had that opposite experience of overcoming fear that might have limited them. I didn't get a chance based on my childhood to even experience that. It was not an option, right? So
Yeah. Well, one of my fears was just to, in my early days of even just being on Infinite Waters, was just to, talk about the stuff which I knew that could land me in hot water. Talk about things which I knew that people would, go at me in the comment sections. So, for me, I had to say, actually, you got to be brave, and by doing it, day in, day out for so many years, you overcome it naturally. But I feel that's a part of people which is also natural. It's like when an actor goes on stage in a theater, they say, I don't mind how many times I've been on this stage. I always, get butterflies. I always have this little fear about me just to, it's like, it's a natural thing. And I feel that anytime you're going to the next level, there should be a fear. Fear is the gatekeeper. fear is the one who's at the door saying, okay, you got to go through me first to get to the next level. So I feel that I respect fear as a gatekeeper, which is holding in its hands the keys to my freedom. If I can face it, not fear it, integrate it with it, integrate with it, then I can go to the next level. So I always see fear as a gatekeeper that everyone is going to face, because there are many levels, and there are many doors to open, depending on what experiences you want. And I feel people have to get used to going to the next level and having a new fear, a new challenge. When we talk of just, I know you're with your community, and we can't help but look around at the isolation on the planet. It's sad when you see so many human beings on the planet, but in these times, a lot of people so separate from each other. What would you say the most powerful way people can, in these times, connect with people? People who feel alone, or
it sort of depends how much trouble you want to get in, is my answer. Because I know in some places they're like even getting people in trouble for being in groups more than two, so obviously it's going to look, based on what consequence you choose in those types of places, it's going to look different, for one person versus the other. But honest to God, I'm not an advocate for physical separation. So the most powerful way you can connect with people is in person. So to whatever degree you feel safe with that, do that. People need proximity. It's not going to work to spend your whole life talking to people on the phone or looking at them across the screen. I'm not going to stay virtual. This is not going to happen for me. This is not something I'm going to create. I need to be in person with people. People need to be in person with people to be healthy and happy. So that's going to be my answer, even though people don't want that answer. Right now they'd rather have me be social distance. I can't say that in good conscience.
How much, I know you have a lot of trust in yourself. How much trust do you have in humanity that we can get ourselves out of this? How much trust do you have in humanity's ability to reverse everything that's happening and to push forward? Do you think we can do it?
No. I know that's horrible to hear from you right now, but I don't think so. I think it will be a big split within people in terms of, people who are really choosing powerfully, like we've been talking about, into what they're wanting, and the rest who will choose more and more and more and more levels of control so that they can feel safe. And I think the majority, it tends to be in history that the majority sides with whatever feels the safest. So
and that's not a bad thing, surely, because as I look at it, everyone is coming in with a different level of consciousness. And a lot of people like you and I, we've been here so many times, we already know that it's just a ride. But a lot of people are new souls. They're unplugged. Their memory has been wiped out. And everything they hear, they believe, because their soul is so fresh and new that they haven't got the past life experiences to realize this is a cosmic dance, to realize we're spiritual beings in a human body. A lot of people are just going along doing what they feel is right. And
yeah, I would want something different for people.
Yes. But do you feel that it can be done if there was an effort by the media?
Oh, yeah.
And an effort by...
There's a very big difference when I'm speaking. This is sort of what makes a conversation like this so difficult. There's a very big difference between what people are capable of and what they will most probably do. So do I feel like people are capable of literally anything? Are they capable of creating a utopia today? Actually, yeah. And it's that capability which I really am hoping that I speak to. But in terms of, looking at the reality of what is and looking at the life path potentials for Earth, do I think that most probably they're going to create more control and propagate more fear and whatever? Yes. So,
but would that serve to help them evolve? Are
Oh
these
yeah.
lessons that have to be learned? Things that people have to go through to wake, so they can really learn more about,
Again, it's yes and no.
themselves.
I have my answer to that is again yes and no, because does a person have to experience cancer in order to, choose a life that they're supposed to be living that would make them actually feel good? No. But is it most likely going to be the path that person A chooses to go through in order to get to that place? Yes. So it's like, it's almost like you're walking this line between not wanting to make it wrong that a person needs a whack a tree at 70 miles an hour moment. But do they absolutely need a whack a tree at 70 miles an hour moment? If that was the case, I wouldn't be here talking.
Right,
I would
right,
let them whack a tree at 70 miles an hour. So,
right.
does that
And it makes absolute sense. And as I'm seeing it, there have been a lot of brave doctors coming out. There have been a lot of brave people who usually don't do this, and that gives me some hope to see actually some people are willing to take a risk. And I feel that when we talk of fear, you have to take a risk. You can't play it safe. If you play it safe, you're going to be the bird in the cage, surely. So how do you manage to fly yourself? Like, you're creating these wonderful these frequency paintings. How are you able to keep your vibration high in the midst of a global pandemic? How are you able to do that?
actually with a discipline? I feed a lot of my energy off of intense levels of discipline, whether it's what I'm eating or, meditation practices that I do. Whenever excessive pressure gets put on the system, you'll watch me respond by excessive pressure, meaning that it's like in the average world, it doesn't take a lot of energy to keep myself in a sort of strong and stable space. But in a time like this, there's got to be a lot more energy. My diet is a lot cleaner than it ever has been, and it's already ridiculous. So now it's like even more extreme. And
What
it would
what
be
what? Let's talk about your diet. Let's talk about your diet. Let's talk about. I'm always talking about the plant-based lifestyle. What are you eating these days? If we don't mind diving there.
I'm also totally plant-based, but I went off of lectins
Okay.
during this pandemic situation because of the amount of pressure that was putting on the system. So I'm even being deliberate about what vegetables I'm eating. And like, I know when I say zero sugar, I'm usually zero sugar, but it's like, I've got a little bit of leeway for more fructose. I'm taking so much sugar out of my diet right now. I mean, everything is dedicated towards keeping the blood sugar so damn stable
Yes.
and just clean. It's almost like, I mean, if you look at what I'm eating right now, it's like I'm on a cleanse, but that's my daily life, you know? And it's serving to keep this level of clarity, which can make it so that I can actually channel through a lot, higher frequency energies, which is necessary when we're sort of taking a deep dive into the shadow like we are right now. So
Right.
I'm doing
Right.
that. I'm being a lot more intentional about, meditations, and specifically, interestingly enough, the meditations that I'm doing more of than anything else is somatic experiencing. It's like as there's so much charge in the world, I'm having a subsequent reaction, right? Everybody is if they're a responsive individual. And so I'm spending a lot of time in meditation, especially in the mornings when I'm waking up, just being with the sensations without making them change at all, paying such attention to the subtle, things that they're telling me to do. On top of that, I talked just now about being stable, but part of that stability that I have actually is the ability to change on a dime. It's so super important to be like in that flow of the universe at large. And you know how it is. I know you do
Yes.
as a person where it's like it's going this way and then all of a sudden 15 minutes later the whole current goes. So it's like I'm
Yes.
having to make sure that my whole life can switch like that. Where it's like I book a plane flight knowing that I might cancel it 2 minutes later, you know. Everything in my life is like so up in the air and I'm like having to make it that way so as to transition with the incredibly fast current changes that keep happening. Things like that is how I'm keeping myself in alignment in times like this, and also, just sort of living for what I want to see in the moment. I noticed that, like in the store, for example, really keeping that vision of I want positivity amongst people. I want people to feel safe with me, is what I'm wanting. So, how do I behave in a way that makes them feel safe with me? And that's keeping my frequency high enough.
Right. So personally,
What about
what's one of
you?
Well, for me, I'm always in nature,
Oh yeah.
breathing in that good ass prana, baby. So for me, I've made it a habit to go into nature. I'm literally, when I'm going into nature every single day to record videos, I'm actually spending another 30 minutes just breathing,
Mhm.
deep from the base of my spine. So a lot of people haven't experienced breath work. They haven't done breath work. They don't know the importance of breathing. Like
I love
literally
that.
go to the mountains and literally breathe. This will change your entire life. We literally need that good ass prana, the oxygen. And a lot of people are not breathing. You're barely breathing from the top of your chest. And we have to be breathing deep from the base of our spines. So that's how I raise my frequency. Deep breathing in the heart of nature, and you will find that no more headaches, no more stress. Everything just you've got a whole new body just by breathing. And people have to learn how to breathe again. I know it sounds basic, but people have to learn how to do it. That it's a whole hidden science. There are some Indian yogis who literally can hold their breath for so long, and they show you the wonders you can do with your breath. you know and people have to learn how to breathe, because the chi contains the life force, and when you're connected to that, you can do phenomenal things. You can heal your entire body. You can do everything. And a lot of people, obviously now they're definitely not breathing, but people have to learn how to really breathe. And I feel that's one of the greatest ways to raise your frequency. Study breath work, study the masters of breathing. There are Indian yogis. There's a lot of people who are really masters at it, and you'll be amazed what you can do when you learn how to breathe properly, and how you can heal yourself. Because I feel a lot of the air people are breathing in is low quality.
Yeah.
And if people could go outside, to clean breathing spaces, they'll literally take away half of their problems.
I take that for granted where I live. You're like, I go into nature. I'm like, I have to go somewhere to get civilization.
Right. And for you personally, when we talk of just finding a way out, which a lot of people are after, a lot of people are ready for a new earth. They're ready
Mhm.
for lockdown to end. They're ready to be able to travel just like we used to be able to travel. What does humanity have to do to get there, in your mind? If you could say three things human beings have to do for us to find a way out of what's happening right now on the planet and not being completely eaten alive.
The first thing that I would say is they have to end the zero sum game. What you're watching right now in the world is a zero sum game. It's an I win, you lose. So, that's part of why we're approaching the pandemic the way that we're approaching it right now, is that it's like, depending on what side you're on of this argument, it's like, well, I get to get my way and you get to sort of be screwed. So it's like, I see a lot of this argument between the youth and elder people, where the older people are kind of like, well, you need to be completely controlled and locked down based on me needing to stay safe, right? Or you've got the younger people who are like, actually, you should just die and let us live, and that's a mad zero sum game. It's like, if we were in a position on one side of that argument to take the other as a part of ourselves, meaning I can't be happy without you actually feeling good, then I think much quicker than we're doing right now, we would actually create a
I'm
plan
talking.
where the people who needed, the safety that they feel like they need could find that in specific ways, and we could find solutions for supporting them in that, whereas other people can take risk. That's where I feel like we would go if we ended the zero sum game. That's the first thing. I think the second thing that needs to happen is people really need to figure out where they feel like they belong. There are a lot of people right now who are not, and I know that there are many of them listening to me right now on this call. I can feel them. We're really meant to create the new earth, and what that looks like is most people who are aware of what the new earth looks like, we're looking at sustainable, intentional communities, and in places where it's a good climate year round, and they're sort of like sitting here waiting for that when the universe is trying to say go build the new earth, because there has to be something for people to transition out of this old society into, right? Start building like now, right? So a lot of people need to be sort of stepping in the direction of that. And for the rest of people, it's about where do you really land, based off of your talents and your desires and everything. So like when I look at my desires, myself, for example, I want this new earth, but I know that where I'm the happiest is helping people who are struggling. So I'm the trenches person. I'm the person who might point and lead people towards where they're meant to go, but it makes me full of a lot more happiness when I'm helping somebody who's suffering than it does having my hands in the earth planting plants, for example. So that tells me where my calling is and where I need to be going, right? And so each person really needs to powerfully, like you said, tell us that moniker again you used for COVID. What was that?
Creating our vision in detail.
Yeah, so that's the next point I would say. Create your vision in detail and start to actually act on it. Damn it,
Right.
Don't just sit there and leave it in your head. You got to take that first action. You got to take the first step. And the reality that people have to get is when you get an inspiration, you have literally less than a minute to take your first action. So if you want, advice from people who are able to produce a ton, it's that you have to immediately take that action. And then take that second step and third step. Stop thinking about the whole end game, right? Just keep your vision on it while you keep stepping in the direction of what it is that you're wanting. So allow the situations that you're in and all the crap that's happening to you to perfectly hone what that vision is for what you're wanting, that art piece that we're co-creating to look like, right? And then take action. Right now I watch people not taking action. That's why I'm harping on this, right? What would be my third thing? My third thing that, to help us get out of the situation is to take your damn attention off of, how to prevent something, right, from occurring to you. And on the opposite side of that, which I would say is still a preventative measure, but it's more like how to build yourself up. So instead of focusing on, what the other army is going to do, in this case, the other army might be some antagonist to your health, take your attention off that crap. Put your attention on your own artillery. How do I live in a way that's healthy for me? What type of practices do I have to add to my day-to-day life to be more resilient? What should I be eating or not eating? Now's the time to get into an exercise regime. Anything you can do to really build yourself up is something that can get us out of the situation that we're in, because I'm telling you, the people who feel trust in their own well-being and health are not the people freaking out right now. Understandably so.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, but medicines are not that. Medicines are not that. Do you know what I mean by saying that? So many people are like, well, I'm on medication. Medication is about symptoms. Medication is not what it takes to, make your body strong. So it's like the alternative health community has got to start speaking. That's the community, honestly, that needs to not shut up right now. The people who are like, look, this is what's great for your immune system. Or like, look, doing this, like you said, breathing, doing breath work does this. I wish that we just had like a megaphone across the universe for those experts today. There's so many things I could say, but those are the three things I'd say.
That's wonderful. That's a gift. And shout out to everyone in the chat. I am paying attention to the chat. So many wonderful comments. Everyone saying, we love you, Teal. Thank you so much. Deep divers, make sure you share this link. Smash the like button. Also, please let people know where they can find you. I know you have tealswan.com. You also have, I'm excited because I have your Oracle deck. And if you haven't, deep divers, gotten Teal's Oracle deck, you're missing out. But you told me you're doing the second Oracle deck? Wow.
Okay. I'm in the middle of my fourth. So my first Oracle deck was called the Frequency deck. It's more like a traditional tarot deck. The second one, which I think is the one that you have, is the Blind Spot Oracle card. That's an important one because it shows you what you don't see. Okay. The third one I did that is in the middle of being published right now is a values deck that helps people understand their values, prioritize their values, and make decisions with their values.
Right.
And the fourth one I'm in the middle of right now is an Ether Creatures deck.
Wonderful.
It's getting ridiculous. I have more time on my hands. Well, I really don't. I have less time on my hands because I'm so busy. But for some reason, I ended up with time to do an Oracle deck, another one. So that's what I'm doing. But yeah, you can find my stuff at tealswan.com. That's the best place to go because I've got everything concentrated, and the likelihood of that getting shut down is smaller. On top of that, yeah, I can go to YouTube and type in Teal Swan. I've got tons and tons and tons of videos, which is how we found
Wonderful.
each other, right?
Definitely. Good old YouTube. you know. And that's the gift. We've been on this journey together for so many years, and I'm proud to call you a dear friend, and I'm happy to see your own journey. I'm happy to see you evolving and doing new things and having your own clothing. I'm wearing, this is Teal's shirt, by the way. Make sure, deep divers, I told you, she's got a clothing, she's got a Oracle decks, you know. It's wonderful to see how you're evolving in such a great way. If you could just leave people with some reminders of what to be aware of in this current pandemic, the most pressing concerns people should have, should be aware of everything that's happening right now. What should people be looking at that they're not looking at? Because as an artist, you've got the beautiful frequency art behind you. You can always see things a lot of people can't see. And I feel in this new age of so many distractions, I feel there's things that we have to be looking at that we aren't looking at. And we're going to be in for a rude awakening if we don't look at it soon. So what things do you think that we're not paying attention to that we really should be?
I'm going to throw you a spiritual one first. It's the bigger picture. A lot of people are not looking at the bigger picture. They're allowing themselves to get sort of swept up in the mundane, superficial. And there's nothing actually negative about that. It's, you know, when I say that, I used words that almost have a negative connotation. It's like there's this temporal life, but there's this non-temporal life that's much larger. In fact, this is the show going on, and we're participating in it. And if you don't really step back out and disidentify from your temporal self enough to look at that big picture, it's like it's almost like you're not understanding what is occurring and why it's occurring and what the most important thing for you to actually be doing is. It's like easy to get lost in day-to-day life, you know, with that and lose the meaning. I would say that if you're able to see the subjective perspective, you have so much more meaning that's in your life and so much more understanding of others and understanding of what is actually occurring. So outside of the big picture, one of the things we're not paying attention to is the financial system. Now, I know that that's painful. By the way, if you guys want a much more in-depth conversation about this, I did a 2021 forecast. I did it in video format, so it's on YouTube. I also did it on my blog, on my website. And you know what I was saying in there is that resiliency is absolutely everything. Like if I was to pick one thing for this entire year for you to be focused on, it's how to create resiliency. But of course, you know, when you're looking at creating resiliency, you have to look at what is not resilient. So what people are not looking at that they need to be looking at is what is not resilient about the world today and about their life today. If a person's paycheck depends entirely on a company that might go under, that's actually not a resilient plan, right? If their food system or food, you know, intake depends entirely on a food system delivering trucks to them, that's not resilient. People are lacking resiliency in a huge way right now. And this goes beyond just, you know, these physical aspects too. There's thinking that's not resilient, you know. There's behaviors, lifestyle behaviors that are not resilient. We could consider if you have an addiction, that's not a resilient type of behavior because obviously that goes to a certain point and then you take a huge nosedive. So we need to be looking at our lives in terms of what is not resilient and what we can do to actually create resiliency. And that's less fun, honestly, than some other years, themes that go on in some other years, because it's rather realistic. You know, we've got to be squarely grounded in reality. And to be completely honest with you right now, a lot of people who don't want to be thinking about money need to be thinking about money because the financial system is in real trouble. I mean, real trouble.
Definitely. Big trouble. But don't you think that as well, a lot of people saw what was coming? I feel a lot of people who, like yourself and I, who kind of went online, and I know you do your public events, of course. So, but as well, you know, you're helping millions of people online. You know, a lot of people, they got stuck in the analog age where they forgot that things were going digital. And now people can't just rely on physical spaces. You have to also remind yourself that you want to have an online business. You want to be able to sell your things online rather than just having a hairdressing salon. Because if it closes down, you might be powerless. You know, you might be powerless. Okay, I think your voice just went out, but let me bring you back. Hold on a second. Shout out to everybody who's here. I think her voice just went out. Let me disconnect and reconnect. Shout out to everybody who's diving deep, wonderful deep divers. Shout out to everybody in the chat. You better, deep divers, if you're on this live, make sure you smash the like button. Make sure you smash the like button and share this link. One love to everybody who's here. How are you enjoying the show, deep divers? Okay. We were diving deep, you know, so many wonderful deep divers here right now. I hope you're breathing in that good ass prana, baby. I told you, deep divers, this was a big surprise. I told you there would be a surprise on the way. Shout out to everybody who's here, everybody who's diving deep. I'll wait for Teal to come back on, but like I said, deep divers, we've just been diving deep, okay, into some very, 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 very powerful information on letting go of fear. You know, I want to thank Teal for coming on, blessing us. I hope she can come back, but if not, 2 hours. Once again, make sure you go to tealswan.com. Okay, she's back.
Can you hear me or no?
Hold on a second. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. There's a bit of an echo, but that should be okay. Let me just see.
1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, that was ironic timing.
Okay, yeah, you might want to just turn off your speaker.
Okay, now it should work.
Turning off the speaker. What about now?
Let's see something. Hold on a second. Okay, that should be okay.
Is it okay now?
Yes. Okay. So that's fine. Fantastic. Once again, everybody in the chat, shout out to everybody who's in the chat. We got the wonderful, incredible Teal Swan here. Make sure, deep divers, you share this link. Smash the like button right now. I told you, we got a whole lot to talk about. So where were we? Let's just...
So where we were is the irony of you saying, well, we have to go online. And I was like, well, there is even lack of resiliency there, which we just witnessed, didn't we?
Right.
Yeah.
You can't depend on this tech anymore anyway. I agree.
Yeah.
But it's, for instance, one of the barber I used to go to, he's been out of a job since March, really, because they've been having endless lockdowns. So this is his whole livelihood. You know, a lot of people who depend on this, who don't have a way of making a living online, this is their bread and butter. You know, so a lot of people have placed all their eggs in one basket. And what do you say to these people who are just still, you know, firmly rooted in just working in the system and they don't have a plan B?
If you don't have a plan B, then the government will eventually come in and probably rescue you, but at a price. And you have to realize that when you get rescue from a government agency, it's at a price. If you don't believe me, just look at human history. So it's, are you willing to pay that price? Are you willing to have the rest of humanity pay that price? If not, you got to really diversify the hell out of yourself.
Yes. Yes. That's powerful. I always tell people that you have to utilize this technology to work for you. It can be a beautiful thing if it can work for you. Now, if we look at just these corporations, they're just people. You know, I was speaking to people on YouTube, even just talking to people who work there and saying, hey, you know, chill out on the censorship. And they seem like decent people, you know, and I always feel that this is how we can build the bridge to actually talk to people who are in these corporations to actually talk to their hearts rather than their minds. Because I feel a lot of the times, just like we were talking about the people who were doing the shootings, if you could talk to that person who's just about to do a shooting, they probably won't do it if they can feel understood, if they can feel like, if you can build a relationship with them, as opposed to saying it's me against you. Because I don't feel it's us against them. I feel that people are just people playing out different roles. And it's not personal. It's just, this is what they're here to do. And I feel people have to establish relationships and build bridges, and build bridges instead of burning them. What would you say? What would you say to that? Do you feel that people have to create more unity with people in these positions who are like working at Facebook and Instagram and all of these places, who really can have a lot of power to kind of control millions of people?
Of course, I would definitely say that. Of course, getting to them is a different thing. For most people,
Greetings, wonderful deep divers. So, hello? Okay.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes. So, yes, as we were saying.
I hope you guys aren't looking at the irony right now. Yeah.
Well, it was going good for 2 hours. Shout out to everyone in the chat, everyone loving the energy. Great energy here. But definitely, it's like the universe is talking to us. We should literally throw away all computers right now. I agree with you, Teal.
Yeah, I don't remember where we were. You should lead us somewhere else.
Yeah. But, let's just talk about really moving forward with everything.
Let's go there, yes, because I think most people listening to this are willing and ready to accept that humanity is choosing into a whack a tree at 70-mile-an-hour moment.
Yes.
If that's the case.
Yes. And
so here's the question I would ask you to sort of go in the direction of that. Because I talk about this all the time, which is why I'm throwing this over to you.
Yes.
So a lot of people, when they hear this, when they're like, okay, I'm getting it, I'm watching people sort of slip into more control. I'm watching people slip into more fear. I'm watching people slip into more separation. So if all of humanity is getting into this, like, things get worse before they get better scenario, why stick around? What's your answer?
I say you don't have to stick around. I say, in terms of, living in the matrix, I say you can get off grid. I say you can build your own communities. You can build sustainable living. I never feel it was meant for human beings to live in cities. There's been a lot of, we're not supposed to be living in such a close, we're supposed to be close together, but not in cities. There's never supposed to be 8 million people in one city, because this is what's breeded the confusion, the pollution, the fear, everyone's energy rubbing up on each other. We're supposed to be living in places with space, open spaces, where the feng shui is so beautiful, and I feel that a lot of people are now looking at the collapse of society. And now we all have to, it's the Exodus time. I feel that's what's happening. Regardless, people are literally going to be living in earth homes and living a very Mad Max lifestyle, in desert caves and all kind of things, because that's where we're heading to. We're seeing that the fire, I have a line which says, when a fire has consumed everything, the only thing left for the fire to consume is itself. That's what's happening on the planet. And the fire is burning itself out. There's nothing anybody can do about it. It's just, we've reached a point of, we've run the planet over. We've run the lifestyle we've been living is not sustainable.
Yep.
And these are just the symptoms. So I feel that this is a rebirth, and people should break off from the system. They should go and live in a desert cave. That could free up a lot more space, breathing space. which is so needed. And, you know, you're so loved in the community. And I know you've had a lot of people, you know, throughout the time you've been here, you've had a lot of people sometimes who have gone against you, but you've stood strong. And I want to commend you on that, to say keep going, because you have so much support here on Infinite Waters. It's unbelievable. Anytime I say, oh my gosh, Teal is here, people go crazy, you know. So people are really rooting for you, and I feel that please continue to do what you're doing, because it's so needed, so important, because there are only a few of us left who are really helping guide humanity to a better state of living. And what you're doing is needed, what you're doing is seen, what you're doing is appreciated. And I want to thank you tremendously. And please keep doing it.
I will.
Yes.
But this work is sort of like the air I breathe, you know? I couldn't do anything else.
Yes. Thank you so much, Teal. And once again, Deep Divers, make sure you go on tealswan.com for all the latest beautiful shadow work. She has amazing videos, books, so much amazing content. And I want to thank you. And please leave us with any message that we can really meditate on, just to sum this whole conversation up in a few sentences, please.
Okay, so what I would leave people with is to notice the things in your life, you know, that are not resilient. And those things should be the things that are being put into sharp detail for you based on what is happening in the world today. And based off of that, intentionally put conscious energy towards creating resiliency in all the different areas of your life. That includes relationships, that includes your spiritual strength, that includes your, you know, mind and the positivity of your mind. That includes physical, tangible steps like making sure that you have diversification in your finances. And on top of doing that, I want you to powerfully decide what it is that you want to see in this world. Now, it's ironic that I think a lot of us today, yourself included, Ralph, we're going back in the direction of what people have said for, you know, so many years, who are in this sort of awakening field. People like Gandhi, who said, you know, be what you want to see in the world. Now is the time to powerfully listen to that, not as a message, but as a way to live our life. And it's very important that we start to actually take action in the direction of what we're wanting, because we can speak about it all day long, and it's not going to come about unless we are willing to take that first step. And believe it or not, if you're willing to initiate, there are a lot of people who will be willing to take that step with you. That's how I ended up with the community that I have today, by the way. I was the one that took the first step to saying we need to move in together, and there were a lot of people willing to move in together, and everything has snowballed in a positive direction from there. So if you're brave enough to take that risk, take that first step in the direction of what you want to see in this world, regardless of what's happening out there, you're going to feel good, because your focus and your energy is going to go towards what you want to create. And there's no greater meaning in life than that.
Thank you so much. Said so eloquently. Thank you so much. Wonderful star. Like I say, you are appreciated. And to everyone who's been in the chat, I hope you enjoy this. Once again, Deep Divers, make sure you smash the like button, share this link. And I'm going to listen to this one again, because so many jewels and gems were dropped. But thank you once again, star, and keep shining. And yeah, so thank you so much.
Love you bunches.
Love you too. Okay. So Deep Diver, shout out to everyone. I hope you enjoyed the wonderful show. Once again, make sure you go to tealswan.com to get all of her latest information. Deep Divers, very powerful information. One love to everyone in the chat. Deep Divers, you better be breathing in that good ass prana, baby. Make sure you listen to this again, because very powerful show, very powerful information. And once again, shout out to everyone who's been diving deep, getting the amazing book Feel Alive by Ralph Smart on Amazon, and the good ass prana shirts at ralphsmart.com/clothes. So Deep Divers, just remind yourself, let love guide you today, not fear. And then just say, and then just say, feels so good to be alive, baby. Can I get a hello there? Wonderful deep divers, you are loved. I love all of you. And once again, thank you to the wonderful Teal Swan. Go and check out her videos right now to be empowered. And I love all of you deep divers. You are appreciated. Have a beautiful day. Peace.